really don't know how I'm going to start this. Should we just hop right into it? I think I should give a bit of background information first. An SCP is an entity, a creature, a monster, a spatial anomaly, an object, or anything that has any type of anomalous properties, period. If it can do things that typically certain things can't do, it's an SCP. If it can teleport at random, kill people without even having to touch them, those are considered SCPs. With every SCP, there's a different type of classification. The main three classifications for any SCP is safe, Euclid, and Keter. Just to also preface, the classifications don't necessarily stipulate whether or not they are dangerous or not. So if something is considered safe, that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't mentally, physically, emotionally, or metaphysically hurt you. Euclid is more like, if you're not keeping an eye on it, something might happen. It's not set in stone. It's not 100% guaranteed, but the likelihood of something happening is there. It's prevalent, it's present. It might happen. The highest level of classification, or what's considered the most dangerous, is Keter. Keter is basically, if you were to leave this thing alone, it would go on to kill multiple people or counties, cities, towns, worlds, universes, multiverses, stuff like that. Perfect example of how the classifications of SCPs doesn't really stipulate whether or not an SCP is dangerous or not is SCP-2118. Essentially, a girl of indeterminate age that, if close to someone who has lost a child, it will open its mouth and relay the sounds of that child at the time of their death. So specific to the point where easily replicate the sound of drowning, the sound of blisters forming in someone's throat, crushing of someone's bones, and that's considered a safe SCP. So just to give you an idea of what you're actually getting into, an SCP's danger or danger level is not at all determined by its classification. Now today, what we're going to do is I'm going to randomly look through some SCPs. I'm going to explain those SCPs to you, and hopefully you'll be entertained. Let's hope the government doesn't kill me for, sending this information out to the public. I believe a voice needs to be heard, and I will be that voice, even if that means the death of me. Face Also some other type of SCP classification, but once we get to those SCPs, then I'll explain the classification types of those SCPs. It's the complete next day. What happened was I read 2 SCPs, but I didn't think they were that interesting. So today I'm going to be reading some other ones. If you're interested in the SCPs that I did read, I should have the number of either SCP right here somewhere, so you yourself can go and check it out. Our first SCP for today is actually a very short one, and not too crazy, but just to kind of lean you into the whole idea of SCPs, this is what we're going to start with. Our first SCP is SCP-6175. Yes, there are more than 1,000 SCPs. As of right now, I believe there's somewhere close to 8,000 to 9,000 SCPs so far. SCP-6175 is a Euclid type with the disruption class of Vlom. Vlom is the secondary tier of this disruption class classification, meaning that it's capable of disturbing normalcy within society. So SCP-6175 is capable of distributing radio signals and transmissions, and those transmissions are to be picked up and received by Foundation personnel that basically house all the SCP and report it to a site called Site 312. On top of that, the SCP Foundation also took it a step further and actually implanted personnel from its organization into NASA to monitor this SCP and basically document any anomalous activity that it may show. Basically what SCP-6175 is the Voyager 1 probe. On the date of 09/15/2022, accessed a camera within itself, and for the next 5 months contacted a Marshall Spatial Flight Center in Alabama. And during the span of that 5 months was displaying multiple paranormal and anomalous activities, which is why it is now documented as an SCP. So the first documented instance within this entire span of 5 months was the probe actually going towards Neptune but losing contact. After a while, the SCP is hypothesized to be brought into another SCP known as the Boots Void, which is SCP-3800, which is something else entirely. After a while, there was contact made with SCP-6175 by an object that looked like an antenna. That same antenna having similarities to the Voyager 1 diagram, basically mimicking the Voyager 1's antenna. The second time SCP-6175 made contact with another object was in the form of a note, which reads, "Voyager did things no one predicted, found scenes no one expected, and promises to outlive its inventors. Like a great painting or an abiding institution, it has acquired an existence of its own, a destiny beyond the grasp of its handlers." By Stephen J. Pine. After 20 days of SCP-6175 presumably just floating around in space, it started using Morse code, displaying the lyrics of David Bowie's song Space Oddity. Because why not? After that weirdness happens, the SCP itself starts to deteriorate and break apart. Those pieces of itself start breaking apart and moving faster than the part that they broke off from. A month after that initial encounter, it's just radio static for about 2 weeks. But after those 2 weeks, they regain contact with this SCP, and it's surrounded by drawings of stars and planets. Yeah, a few months towards the SCP finally finishing its mission, it transmitted one message saying, "I love you and I always will." After NASA sent out another probe called the Voyager 2, the Voyager 2 also sent another message stating, "I love you too, dear, now it's time to come back home." And that's basically what this SCP is and everything that's been documented about it. So if you were to ask me exactly what I think this SCP is, I would assume that this SCP has some level of sentience or some type of soul or human inside of it. Before I leave off this SCP and move on to the next one, I do also want to make sure that you all know that there are some logs in this SCP file that are removed. And that's something that you'll see with SCPs, that there will be sometimes certain dates, certain locations, certain people's names or ages that will be completely blotted out for safety. And yeah, that's basically SCP-6175. Really strange SCP. Not scary, but just strange. The next SCP we will be talking about is SCP-112 ARC. And it's a very interesting SCP. So with SCP-112 ARC, there is this very paramount rule that comes about when someone who still has their, how can I say this without being demonetized, genitals attached to them. And this applies to people with male or female sex organs, meaning that if your tubes aren't tied or if your balls are not cut off, you are fair game. The ability that this SCP has only activates in close proximity towards people that have those organs. And it requires at least 4 people to monitor it at all times, but only needs 1 person to stay awake to make sure that it's all right. All 4 of those people being castrated. Also on top of this, volunteers that are with this SCP are to be put 2 miles below the earth, and anything the volunteers ask for is to be given to them immediately. If there is any reason as to why someone didn't give it to them, that person is to be terminated. And by termination, I don't know if they mean killed, removed, that could mean death, but it could also mean they just got fired. The actual description of this SCP is a 2-meter wide sphere, which as of right now has not been determined whether or not it can move, but it hasn't been completely ruled out either. The way they were actually able to see what this SCP looks like is by using thermal imaging. People around this SCP regard this SCP as a young black boy, and the people that are typically around it have variable changes in their mood and personality, more adjacent to being aggressive. Exposure to the SCP also seems to corrupt the memories of the volunteers that are in its proximity. Not only that, the SCP communicates with these volunteers and actually has demands that it asks of them. These demands can be from literature to music to something as simple and obscure as cloth, or something as difficult to procure like uranium. Anytime this SCP is denied what it wants, its temperature will start to rise so high to the point where it reaches 450 degrees Celsius. Until the demands that the SCP has stated are completed, it will not lower its heat. On the same note, if the SCP is upset, the volunteer that is watching the SCP will also follow suit. So the effects that happen when anyone with complete sexual organs and regular amounts of sexual hormones approaches this SCP, people within the vicinity will be pinned to the ground by an extremely strong gravitational force. The gravitational force can be so strong that not only does it kill everyone in the room, but it can destroy the environment that it's around and cause seismic activities, which can lead to earthquakes. If you're in a 3-mile vicinity of this SCP and it's aware of your presence and you still have your giblets, you're probably gonna die. Basically, a simplified version of what this SCP is just incel hockey. Anyone in a 3-mile radius that is clapping cheeks, that is making out, that is doing anything sensual in any way possible will make this thing so upset and angry that it will turn anything in a 3-mile radius into a pancake. The third SCP we will be talking about today is SCP-6557. At the very beginning of this SCP's file, it states that on 12/08/2794, there will be a K-class world-ending event that cannot be stopped at all. But luckily for us, you, me, everyone we know will not be around for that, so it doesn't really matter. But it does also say that in order to prevent this from happening to future timelines, you can read the rest of the file to see what can be done. SCP-6557 is a object class of Archon/neutralized. Now, typically within the SCP lore, a neutralized SCP is an SCP that's regarded as killed or removed from existence. Archons are SCPs that could be contained but are so intrinsically important to society and reality as a whole that if you were to contain them, it probably wouldn't be a good idea. Firstly, it states any Foundation personnel that are going back in time to 1764 or earlier in Germany or France are to make no deviations or changes within that timeline to stop the taking of Trier in August 1794. If a Foundation personnel member is going back in time to get another SCP before an event this SCP brings about, it states that 98.7% of the jumps to be made are made successful. From its creation in 958 to 1794, a team called Omega-6 is assigned to protect SCP-6557. The 2 members of the team are recruited at 18 and taught for 2 years on the customs and traditions of the time period that they'll be going to. At 20 years old, both of the members will be sent back in time and will be on a 50-year shift on protection of this SCP, meaning that until 1794, one person will take 50 years and then the other person will take 50, and then it'll flip-flop until we eventually get to that year. During these shifts, they're supposed to observe this SCP and make sure that there's no deviations or any changes to the timeline that might accidentally hurt this SCP in any way possible. If a K-class scenario is in effect, the designated end jumper at every site is to go to the date 1905-2512 with a full copy of this exact document. This SCP is a market cross in Trier's main market area, with the rules being that if this cross is not destroyed on 12/08/1794, a K-class scenario world-ending event will ensue. The date that this happens, 12/08/2794, which, if you've been paying attention, is 10,000 years away from the date it was destroyed. In the original timeline, when France was taking siege of Trier, this market cross was destroyed, which is why the stipulations are in effect. If the market cross is knocked over before the intended date, or if it's left untouched after the intended date, then an A to Z, Omega, or K-class event will occur. Within these world-ending events, specific things will happen depending on what type of K-class event it is. As I said before, there's an A to Z. So there are some stuff that happens where human beings become endangered or extinct, or where they become immortal. There's a bunch of different things that might happen, and it's not subject to one specific world-ending event. World-ending event could mean literally everyone dies to we're not even human anymore. The way that this SCP was discovered to be the main culprit of these K-class world-ending events was when there were 8 warnings that commonly had this SCP associated with it, therefore making it the SCP we know now. One of these K-class world-ending events ensued when a musket shot was fired towards the head priest of Trier, with the market cross actually blocking the shot. That priest went on to teach thaumaturgal rituals to his subjects and was able to basically control all human consciousness. Another one of these K-class world-ending events happened when 2 agents that were on that 50-year shift accidentally destroyed the cross, and in doing so, threw the rubble and remains out into the ocean. This, in turn, created a telepathic signal to everyone on the planet, and in doing so, 96% of the entire world population walked into the water and drowned. Another one of these K-class world-ending events was the cross having a copy, and that copy multiplying over time. It got to a point where it got so bad that the timeline was deemed dead by the SCP Foundation. This K-class event happened because Foundation agents were sent to assassinate an archbishop named Heinrich I, who was responsible for the construction of the cross. By killing him, the cross doesn't exist, and therefore the timeline is tainted. Another one of these world-ending events was when the cross gave ants omniscience, and the entire world was taken over by hyper-intelligent ants. This K-class event happened literally because someone stepped on an ant. That's what happened.